Did you know that the way you think is the #1 determining factor in having a panic attack? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the various thinking strategies that trigger and cause panic attacks. Hi everyone. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how the way you think can cause you to have a panic attack, and some of the thinking strategies that you might not be aware of that actually drive panic and panic disorder. Now, for a lot of people, they aren't even aware that they're having these panic-inducing thoughts. And so recognizing some of these thinking patterns can be extremely important in combating panic attacks and stopping the panic cycle. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about thinking strategies that promote panic. Now, panic attacks can be extremely scary in that they're a sudden rush of intense fear or discomfort that can come completely out of the blue for no apparent reason. They can be associated with a number of physical symptoms and sensations, including your heart pounding, rapid breathing, sweating, muscle tension, dizziness or lightheadedness, blurred vision, hot flashes, chills, stomach distress, shakiness, and dissociation symptoms like derealization and depersonalization. Now, in panic disorder, these panic attacks can occur with no apparent trigger whatsoever, at times when people don't expect the panic attack to happen. And this can result in a person becoming extremely anxious and fearful of when the next panic attack is going to happen. The way I like to describe it is that it's almost like there's this time bomb that's been set to random inside the person. And so they have no idea when a panic attack might happen, but they're constantly fearful and on the lookout for it. Now, I've done a number of videos explaining the fear of fear model of panic disorder, and I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at those videos as they serve as an important basis for understanding what actually happens in a panic attack. But in short, panic attacks are associated with the various physical sensations that I mentioned earlier. So heart racing, sweating, hyperventilation, those types of things. When a person begins to experience these physical sensations, what happens is that they then interpret those physical sensations and they apply meaning to those sensations. The person starts to have what I call the uh-oh reaction. Uh-oh, what's happening? What if I'm having a heart attack? What if I'm having a stroke? What if I'm going crazy and lose control? What if I pass out? What if other people notice my anxiety? These uh-oh thoughts are scary in that they represent really severe or scary negative outcomes that we fear might happen. And so having these thoughts then leads to increase in anxiety. Now, the more anxious I feel, the more I then might hurry up to try and get out of the situation where I'm starting to feel these panic sensations come on, or I might tense up to prepare myself for whatever is about to happen. And what this results in is that my physical sensations increase, and that spirals me into what I call this fear of fear cycle. So, therefore, the key idea and the key to understand what's happening as a panic attack, what's happening in a panic attack, is that it's not the physical sensations of panic that are the problem. It's not the person's heart racing, it's not the hyperventilation, it's not the sweating, it's not the blurred vision, it's not the dizziness. None of those things cause a person to have a panic attack. But rather, it's the way the person thinks about and interprets those physical sensations that causes a panic attack. Panic attacks and panic disorder are caused by catastrophic misinterpretations of normal body sensations. So what this means is that if you change the way you think about these physical sensations associated with panic, it's going to block this fear of fear cycle from happening, and it's going to stop the panic attack in its tracks. Therefore, it's really important to understand and recognize the ways in which you might think that are actually causing and triggering panic attacks. So, what I want to talk about is what I call thinking strategies that promote panic. And what I mean by this is that these are the ways that you would want to think. These are the types of thoughts that you would want to have if you were intentionally trying to trigger a panic attack. And what we know is that for people who are experiencing panic attacks in the context of panic disorder, these are the types of thoughts that people think that makes them more susceptible and more vulnerable to experiencing panic attacks. So if you're more aware of some of these thinking strategies that promote panic, you're more likely to recognize when you're engaging in this type of panic-promoting thinking. And if you're able to catch yourself when using these panic-promoting thinking styles, you're more likely to be able to intervene and change the way you think. So, what are some of the thinking strategies that promote panic? What are some of the ways in which people can think that make them more vulnerable to having a panic attack? Well, one of the first is to pay really close attention to your body sensations. As I mentioned earlier, panic disorder is almost like someone has this panic time bomb inside of them, and there's this timer that's been set to random. And as a result, you never know when a panic attack might happen. And so it's natural to be constantly on the lookout for it. So if you're constantly worrying about having a panic attack and constantly scanning your body for physical sensations, you're going to be more likely to notice any small change or any physical sensations, and this could spiral you into having a panic attack. So the idea is when you catch yourself paying really close attention to any physical sensations that could indicate a possible panic attack, the idea is to divert your attention away from focusing on your body sensations. Because the more you focus on those body sensations, the more likely you are to experience a panic attack. Another thinking strategy that promotes panic is thinking about past times you've had a panic attack and worrying about them happening again. So for example, if you had a panic attack the last time you rode the bus, you might find yourself thinking a lot about how awful an experience that was and how you never want that to happen again. What do you think this type of thinking is going to do for the next time you take the bus somewhere? Well, you can probably tell you're likely to feel more anxious and nervous about the possibility of having a panic attack on the bus, and you're more likely to go into that situation paying attention to any potential signs of a panic attack, and the combination of those two things almost certainly sets you up to have a panic attack the next time you ride the bus. Now, related to this, another common thinking strategy that promotes panic is actively wishing that you're not going to get more anxious. Like I mentioned before, panic attacks can be extremely scary, and no one likes the way it feels to have a panic attack. Therefore, it makes sense that you would wish to not get more anxious when you start to feel the initial signs of a panic attack coming on. The problem is, the more you try to fight having a panic attack by trying to wish away the physical sensations, the more likely you are to actually experience a panic attack. Now, another thinking strategy that promotes panic is focusing on small increases in anxiety and telling yourself that they are a sign of the worst to come. The worst case scenario that could happen from these small initial increases in anxiety. We call this type of thinking catastrophizing. And this type of catastrophic thinking, when faced with small increases in anxiety, just generates increased anxiety and spirals a person into that fear of fear cycle. Now, sometimes people who are experiencing panic disorder will make a commitment to themselves that they vow to never have another panic attack. The idea behind this thinking strategy is it's almost like if they can just try hard enough, then they can prevent themselves from having a panic attack. However, if you had control over whether or not you were going to have a panic attack, you probably wouldn't have panic disorder. This wouldn't be a problem. That's the whole point. Panic attacks and panic disorder feel like they come completely out of the blue and that the person has no control over the situation. The reality is about 1/3 of the population will have a panic attack every year, and so panic attacks are actually very common. So vowing to never have a panic attack is just a way of inviting more panic attacks from coming on. Now, another thinking strategy that can lead to more panic attacks is thinking that you can run away from your panic sensations, thinking that if you just avoid anything that may bring on a panic attack, or avoid anything that might bring on the physical sensations of a panic attack, then you can prevent a panic attack from happening. But again, it's important to remember the key point from the fear of fear model of panic, and that's that the physical sensations of a panic attack are not what causes a panic attack. It's the interpretation of those physical sensations. Therefore, by trying to run away from the panic sensations or trying to avoid panic sensations from coming on, the underlying message that you're giving yourself is that the physical sensations are dangerous and that you need to avoid them, which just increases your anxiety whenever you feel those physical sensations come on. And that's the start of a panic attack. Now, people who are experiencing panic attacks and panic disorder can become extremely harsh and critical of themselves. And sometimes what can happen is that they can have unrealistic expectations about how quickly they can learn ways of dealing or managing panic and panic disorder. One of the things I often see in my clients as I work with them is to manage panic attacks is that they expect that they're going to master anxiety and panic management techniques right away. They expect that they can learn relaxation techniques or exposure or cognitive challenging strategies right away and instantly, and use those strategies to stop having any further panic attacks. All this really does is put a lot of pressure on the person with the underlying expectation that they should be able to stop having panic attacks immediately once they've learned some of these tools. The panic management techniques I've talked about in previous videos are skills, and just like any skill, they take time and practice. And so it's important to have realistic expectations about taking some time to learn and practice the skills before they can actually effectively help you stop having panic attacks. Now, another thinking strategy that promotes panic is thinking that there's something desperately wrong with you if you have a panic attack. It's almost like those days without an incident sign that you see in warehouses and some workplaces. For people who experience panic attacks, they can sometimes keep a mental tally of how long it's been since the last time they had a panic attack. And if they have a panic attack, it resets the tally back to 0, and that they've completely failed. Once again, it's important to recognize that panic attacks are fairly common. And just because you have a panic attack doesn't mean that you failed or that you've gone straight back to square one. It just means that you had a panic attack. And oftentimes, if you allow yourself to learn something about what might have contributed to the panic attack, rather than just beating yourself up about having the panic attack in the first place, this can actually be really helpful. It can be a learning experience. And related to this, I often see in a lot of my clients that they get mad at themselves for having a panic attack. And what this does is it really sets up people for having further panic attacks. If you're getting mad at yourself for having a panic attack, what you're telling yourself is that you should have been able to control it, and that there's something wrong with you that you can't stop having panic attacks. Once again, this puts unnecessary pressure on you and sets you up for further panic attacks. So rather, the idea is to accept that panic attacks sometimes happen, and that it's not necessarily your fault, and it's not that you did anything wrong by having a panic attack. The more compassion you show yourself following a panic attack, the less likely you are to have panic attacks in the future. And finally, one of the biggest myths that all of us tend to carry is that our thoughts are an accurate representation of what's actually happening. Never doubting the reality of your thoughts is a significant thinking strategy that promotes panic. The thoughts in the fear of fear model are all unrealistic or catastrophic misinterpretations of what's actually happening. If you believe that your thoughts are true and representative of what's actually going on, then you're going to believe that you're having a heart attack, or that you're going crazy, or that you're going to lose control and embarrass yourself. But those things aren't actually true. This is something that we refer to as emotional reasoning, which I've talked about in a previous video. And essentially at the heart of emotional reasoning is this assumption that just because I feel it, it must mean it's true. And related to thinking strategies in panic, the assumption is the fact that I'm having these thoughts must mean that they're true. If I'm having a thought that I'm having a heart attack, it must mean that I'm actually having a heart attack. But if you can recognize that the way you're thinking about the physical sensations of panic are unrealistic, either overestimating threat or catastrophizing, then this can help you begin to challenge and doubt the veracity of these thoughts. And if you can tell yourself that the thoughts that you're having about these physical sensations aren't true, that can stop panic attacks in their tracks. So these are the various thinking strategies that can promote panic. And if you have recurring panic attacks and panic disorder, you may not be able to relate to all of these thinking strategies, but I bet that you can relate to at least some of them. And so if you can remind yourself that these ways of thinking are counterproductive and are actually making panic attacks more likely, you can more effectively short-circuit the fear of fear cycle and stop the panic attack process. If you want to learn more about what causes panic attacks, check out this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.